Hello students, welcome back to Prepon. These days we are discussing a few MCQs for Civil Services Prelims exam. We have discussed a few questions in the form of last 5 sessions. Let us take few more questions on polity, history and art and culture. This is session number 6. So let us begin and discuss some important questions which may surface in your exam. First is about indigo cultivation, an issue which you can say it was an issue in the whole 19th century, it was an issue in the beginning of 20th century also. Those few statements. Around the beginning of 19th century, more than 90% of indigo in Britain was imported from India. Whatever indigo was imported in Britain, it was mostly from India, first statement. Indigo plants exhausted the soil of it all the nutrients, which made rice cultivation quite difficult. Third, the British redressed the grievances of indigo cultivators during the Indigo Revolt 1859 because the farmers already had obtained a judicial order against this plantation. So which is correct? First is correct. Around 1800 or so, most of the indigo that was imported in England was from India. Initially it was 30%, but by 1810 it was from India. 95% of indigo that was imported was from India, correct? Indigo was used there in the textile industry. Indian indigo was very much in demand. Indigo plants exhausted. Yes, indigo plants had deeper roots in the soil, and the British planters used to force Indian cultivators to grow indigo on the best soil, whereas the cultivators wanted to grow rice over there, so that rice was more important or richer crop for them, but they wanted that the planters should, the Indian cultivators should grow indigo. So this was also correct. And after indigo had been cultivated on a particular plant, particular field, then the field used to become, you can say, inefficient for further cultivation, and it was difficult to grow any further crops on that particular field. So that is also correct. It used to become uncultivable, not useful. Third, the British redressed the grievances of indigo cultivators during the British obviously redressed the grievances, but not because the indigo cultivators had obtained a judicial order. When the complaints came, they appointed Indigo Commission. Commission went into the issue and found out that planters are definitely doing something wrong. Hence, they issued notification through which the grievances could be redressed. And it was also mentioned that nobody can be compelled to grow indigo. So first and second are correct. Third is not correct. A is the answer. From the last decades of 18th century, indigo cultivation in Bengal expanded rapidly, and Bengal indigo came to dominate the world market. These small inputs are very, very important. In 1788, only 30% of the indigo imported in Britain was from India, but by 1810, the proportion became 95%. There were other problems too. The planters usually insisted that indigo be cultivated on the best soils, in which peasants preferred to cultivate rice. Indigo, moreover, had deeper roots and it exhausted the soil rapidly. After indigo harvest, the land could not be sown with rice. NCERT Class 3, Class 8, Part 3. And many questions are being asked from these NCERTs of lower classes. The government appointed an Indigo Commission to inquire into the problems of indigo cultivation. Evidences brought before the Indigo Commission final report exposed the coercion and the corruption of the planters. The result was that mitigation of the worst abuse of the system, the government issued a notification in 1860 that the Raiyat could not be compelled to grow indigo, and it would ensure that all disputes were settled by the legal means. So this was indigo cultivation. Deebandhu Mitra wrote a book about these issues of, you can say, abuses of indigo cultivation by the name of what? Neel Darpan, which was translated into English by Michael Madhusudan. That around this time only, 1860, Neel Darpan was written by Deebandhu Mitra. Consider the following statements about judicial activism. A few statements. It emanates from the notions of an underperforming executive. Government is not performing properly. Government is not fulfilling all its governmental duties. It emanates from this only. It emanates from the notion of underperforming legislature, or legislature is not working as per its constitutional mandate, or too much of its use may lead to people losing faith in democratically elected government. If it is too much used, it might be possible that the people may start losing faith in the government, because every time courts come into picture, it may undermine the principle of constitutionalism, which is based on the system of separation of powers. So judicial activism means when the courts becomes overactive and courts started ruling the country with the help of its orders and judgments. It courts does it only when the executive, that is the government, is not performing its constitutional function, or the legislature is not framing the right kind of laws. Various gaps are left in the laws for further manipulation by the government. So obviously, when the other two organs are underperforming, then judiciary had to become overactive. So both are correct. Too much of its use may lead people to lose faith. Obviously, when we want government elected by the people, not government selected. We want not government elect. We want government elected by the people, not government by judiciary. But when too much of judicial activism is taking place, obviously people lose faith in the government, because they come to the conclusion the government doesn't do anything. It is the judiciary only which is taking all the action. It means government is useless. So it is correct. Too much of judicial activism obviously erode the sanctity of the government or the elected government. Obviously, when judiciary intervenes in the domain of executive and legislature, it disturbs the theory of checks and balances, and too much inclination is shown towards judiciary. So yes, it undermines the principle of what? Constitutionalism, which says that the constitution definitely should have certain checks and balances so that all the organs do well in their areas, which is based on the concept of separation of powers. So all the four are correct so far as judicial activism is concerned. Correct? This is this thing. And government time and again says that we should refrain from interfering in these affairs, because it is the government it is the government's function to do, not our function. You can see newspaper today also, Supreme Court has said this is not our function, let the government do. So judicial activism, correct? Consider the following statements about Officials Secret Act 1923. These questions are very, very important. They are directly and indirectly hinting towards the things which are going on these days in the current affairs. Officials Secrets Act 1923, it specifically defines what is secret or what is official secret. It punishes both the person communicating the secret information or obtaining, the one who is receiving and the one who is communicating. So the Official Secret Act was passed in the colonial period by the British government for its own benefit, and the law is used by the independent Indian government as it is, and the law does not mention specifically what is secret, what is officially secret. Enough margin is there for the manipulation by the officers, and by using this loose definition, or you can say loose phrase official secret, it might be possible that the government may not answer the queries raised under RTI. So yes, this law does not define what is secret, what is official secret. But it is correct that it punishes both the one who communicates the official information which is secret and the one who receives the secret information. So second is correct, first is not correct. It nowhere defines what is secret and leaves enough margin for the government to classify anything as secret. Public servants could deny any information terming it as a secret when asked under RTI Act. It punishes both the persons communicating and receiving. The law applicable to government servants, citizens, provides a framework for dealing with espionage, sedition, and other potential threats to the integrity of the nation. These things are very, very important. May be asked in an exam this way, that way. The law makes spying, sharing in secret information, unauthorized use of uniforms, withholding information, interference with the armed forces in prohibited areas, among others, punishable with offences. If guilty, it may be 14 years of imprisonment or fine. The information could be any reference to a place belonging to or occupied by the government offices, documents, photographs, sketches, maps, plans, models, etc. etc. So all this is covered under the Official Secret Act 1923. Question on ancient India. Which of the following features were not present in the Indus civilization? We are discussing Indus civilization. Certain features. Public hygiene and sanitation systems were present or not? Food security system was present or not? Existence of labor class or large prayer houses. So we are talking of Indus civilization. There were obviously lot of emphasis on, you can say, the drainage system, and all the drains used to cover manholes, and the manholes were covered by the stone lids. Yes, they were very much concerned about their hygiene. All the main doors used to open in the side lanes, not on the main roads. The Indus people were too much concerned about their, you can say, hygiene and sanitation. That is correct. No main door was opening on the main street. They always opened in the side lanes. So first is correct. They used to hoard grains. We have found good number of granaries from important Indus cities, particularly Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Kalibangan, etc. etc. In Mohenjo-daro, there is a great granary, Maha-Annagar, which is the largest building in Mohenjo-daro. So yes, they used to hoard grains. They were conscious enough for their food security system. Correct. There was existence of labor class. Yes, we have found workmen quarters. We have found workmen quarters. So yes, there was existence of labor class also, but we don't find any prayer houses because no temple structures type of things could have been found from the Indus religious system. We do not find any structural temples, so large prayer houses are missing in the architectural setup of Indus civilization. So first, second, third were there, fourth was not part of it. So D is the answer, which is not. Which of the following issues did Gandhiji start his first nationwide agitation? For which of the following issues? Was it for social justice or economic justice or legal justice or political justice? It is a very easy question. You can definitely answer. 1919, Gandhiji started Rowlatt Satyagraha because Rowlatt Satyagraha did not allow people to appear before the court of law if they have been arrested by the government under the charge of sedition. So it was more for legal justice because the law did not allow to go them from to appear before the court of law. They were not allowed under the concept of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus means we can appear before the court of law if some grievance is there, but the law did not allow. Anybody can be booked for 2 years with no right to appear before the court of law. So it was legal justice. Hence Gandhiji started Rowlatt Satyagraha and founded Satyagraha Sabha. And with the help of Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims, he carried on this All India campaign, and during which Jallianwala Bagh took place. So it is legal justice. Law was not allowing Indians to appear before the court of law for redressal of their grievances, as they had been arrested under the charge and they were not allowed to go before the court of law. Which of the following were related to the issues of depressed classes during freedom struggle? Certain you can say Satyagraha or small events are there which are related to the issues of depressed classes. Mahar Satyagraha, Vaikom Satyagraha, Shri Narayan Dharam Paripalan Yugam, or self-respect movement. So my purpose through these questions is to make you understand the things also, so that in this way or that way, or one form or the other, these may appear in your examination. Yes, Mahar Satyagraha was started by Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar in 1926 in the Mahar area, which is in Raigad district right now. It was for, you can say, that the depressed classes were not allowed to have water from a water tank. So it was for this particular purpose. So it was led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Vaikom Satyagraha was led by T.K. Madhavan, K. Kelappan. It was a temple entry movement in Vaikom. Temple entry movement. Depressed classes were not allowed to enter the temples. Vaikom, they were talking of a temple. This was a temple was of Lord Shiva temple. This Vaikom is now in Kottayam district of Kerala. So it was also temple entry movement for depressed classes. K. Kelappan and T.K. Madhavan played a very important role in Vaikom Satyagraha. Shri Narayan Dharam Paripalan Yugam was started by Shri Narayan Guru in 1903, you can say, It was for the spiritual educational development of depressed classes. Self-respect movement started in 1925 actually, and E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar became very, very important. He became the father of, you can say, Dravid movement. E.V. Ramaswamy Naikar, also called Periyar. Dravid movement arose out of this self-respect movement. This self-respect movement was founded by S. Ramanathan, but he invited Ramaswamy Naikar to lead the movement. So the main figure was Ramaswamy Naikar, though it was started or founded by Mr. Ramanathan. So this is just a small fact, even though it is only Ramaswamy Naikar who was most important person with self-respect movement. So all the four were connected with the issues of depressed classes. As I told you, 1920s became very, very important in various aspects. Gandhiji had taken the command of freedom struggle, workers movement had been taking place, labor movement had been taking place to some extent, and Hindu-Muslim issues also had arisen, and this, you can say, communist movement was there. So good number of issues were developing. In 1926 around, Dr. Ambedkar also had become very, very active. This is the explanation. The temple for which this was led was Mahadev Temple at Vaikom, and the Vaikom is in the district of Kottayam in Kerala. Self-respect movement was also for emancipation of women also. Anti-Brahmin movement. Which of the following foreign travelers did not write about Vijayanagar kingdom? Vijayanagar kingdom was very, very important kingdom of medieval India. It played a very important role in the politics of South India. It was powerful also. Krishan Dev Rai was the most important king of Vijayanagar kingdom, Vijayanagar empire, and it was visited by many travelers. The question is, which foreign traveler did not visit Vijayanagar? And many travelers had visited and wrote about Vijayanagar. So Abdul Razak, who came from as ambassador of Shah of Persia to, you can say, he came to Calicut as an ambassador. He also visited Vijayanagar in the time of King Dev Raya too. He talks about Vijayanagar in his writing. Caesar Frederick visited Vijayanagar after it was devastated in the Battle of Tallikota in 1565. Battle of Tallikota took place, in which Ahmednagar, Bijapur, Golconda and Bidar together they defeated Vijayanagar. Vijayanagar kingdom. At that time, king was Sadashiv Rai, but the battle was led by Ram Raya. Ram Raya was minister, but he had become de facto ruler. The de jure ruler was Sadashiv Rai. At the time of Battle of Tallikota, king of Vijayanagar was Sadashiv Rai, not Ram Rai. Usually this is asked. It was Sadashiv Rai. Ram Rai was the minister, but he had become de facto ruler. So Vijayanagar, very, very important. Robert Swell wrote a book, The Forgotten Empire, about Vijayanagar. Bernier, who came in 1656 and remained in the time of later part of Shahjahan and Aurangzeb. So he did not visit Vijayanagar. So first, second, third are correct. Fourth was not part of Vijayanagar's, you can say, foreigners who visited Vijayanagar. Abdul Razak, a Persian traveller, wrote about Vijayanagar kingdom. Caesar Frederick visited Vijayanagar after Battle of Tallikota, gave account. Robert Swell wrote a book, The Forgotten Empire. The Forgotten Empire. Bernier never wrote about Vijayanagar. He visited time of Mughals. Which of the following measures of the British were causes of revolt of 1857? Which of the following were measures? We are talking about the causes of revolt of 1857. General Services Enlistment Act 1856, Religious Disabilities Act 1850, and Summary Settlement 1856. So which of the following were the causes of revolt of 1857? By the General Services Enlistment Act passed by Canning, it was made mandatory that Indians had to work overseas. They can be sent as soldiers to work in overseas campaigns. Indians did not cross ocean as per their tradition, because if they cross ocean, their religion will be polluted, and the caste rules did not allow them to serve outside India. But this particular thing made it compulsory, mandatory, that any soldier can be asked to serve outside India. So, and caste was a very sensitive factor, so it also played a role in the revolt of 1857, correct? Religious Disabilities Act 1850 allowed that any Indian who is converted to Christianity can inherit the property of his ancestors. It means even if you cross over to another religion, still you do not lose your property rights. This way, Indians will be motivated enough to become part of Christianity, and it was a measure of conversion. So this act allowed that Indians still can inherit property. It was also one of the important reasons then that they wanted to Christianize us, and they are interfering in our systems. Summary settlement of 1856 also was one of the reasons. Why? Because in our northwestern provinces and Awadh, it was applied where the government wanted to collect revenue directly from the Rayyat, and they wanted to end middlemen. And the middlemen were the Talukadars. So Talukadars of Awadh were divested of their powers to collect revenue. And because of such summary settlement, the Talukadars lost 50% of their estates. They lost their rights to collect revenue. So they were also instigating, you can say, rebellion in Awadh and northwestern provinces. It was also one of the reasons of revolt of 1857. All the three, you can say, acts or the orders of the government were the causes of, you can say, revolt of 1857. A very, very important question. General Services Enlistment Act passed by Canning compelled Indians to serve outside as soldiers. Religious Disabilities Act 1850 had allowed Christians converts to inherit property. Summary settlement reduced the powers of Talukadars in collection of revenue. They lost half of their estates. It also led to the increase in the powers of moneylender, who worsened the conditions of farmers of Awadh and northwestern provinces. Again, another type of question which is a common question in civil services prelims exam, textiles and the estates from where they belong to. Pochampalli, Tamil Nadu; Patola, Madhya Pradesh; Sambalpuri is Odisha. So Sambalpur is in Odisha, so you can mark 3 as correct, but 3 is part of 3 options. So such questions are usually asked. Pochampalli is from Andhra Pradesh, not Tamil Nadu. Patola is from Gujarat, not Madhya Pradesh, but Sambalpuri is from Odisha. So these are basically textile work of sari particularly. So they are from different provinces. So it is from Andhra Pradesh, it is from Gujarat, it is from Odisha. Pochampalli sarees are made in Andhra Pradesh, Patola are from Gujarat, Sambalpuri in Odisha. Which of the following events happened the earliest? Of the 4 events, which took place the earliest? Appointment of JVP Committee for State Formation, an amendment to the Constitution allowing framing of a special provisions for socially and educationally backward classes, SCs or STs, establishment of Planning Commission, adoption of Community Development Program. So which of the following took place the earliest? So JVP committee was formed in 1948 to look into the issue of linguistic reorganization of state. This issue was developing around that time. On what basis the states or provinces should be reorganized? The government appointed this Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel and Pattabhi Sitaramaiah committee, JVP committee. So JVP committee gave its report, and it said linguistic reorganization is not advisable. So it was in 1948. An amendment to the Constitution by First Amendment Act 1951, Article 15 Clause 4 was added to the Constitution, which allowed Parliament can make a special provision for socially and educationally backward classes, SCs and STs. Initially, it was not part of original Constitution. It was incorporated by very First Amendment Act 1951. Planning Commission was established in 1950 March. National Planning Committee was started by Subhash Chandra Bose in 1938. It became Planning Commission after independence. So it was 1950, and community development program was started in 1952. The biggest program for development of rural areas was started by Government of India in 1952. So the earliest was JVP committee. Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel and Pattabi Sitaramaiah. Sitaramaiah was official historian of Indian National Congress, and he also contested against Subhash Chandra Bose in the Haripur session, which took place in Gujarat in 1938, and Sitaramaiah was defeated by Subhash Bose. So these were few questions for your prelims exam. Hope you enjoyed these questions and definitely have got something out of it. So thanks a lot. Please share the video, like it and subscribe to the channel.